And welcome back to Bengal Bites, a podcast about the Cincinnati Bengals from one fan's real, honest perspective. I'm your host, Derek. This is episode 72. This is the Week 13 recap episode where the Pittsburgh Steelers came into Paycor Stadium and defeated our beloved Cincinnati Bengals 44-38 in a score that sounds high. Yes, you're correct. That's the highest scoring game of all time between these two franchises, but also a score that's maybe a little bit deceptive. Bengals lost by 6, but it wasn't really that close. Bengals were not really legitimately in this game. They never really felt like they had a chance to win. After about halftime, Steelers started to pull away, and Bengals did a good job of hanging around, keeping it interesting. But so it wasn't like a complete blowout. They did enough to score enough points to keep it, respectable. But this was not the game we were looking for. Zach Taylor was talking about how, coming into this is December football. This is when we need to play our best, etc., etc. Well, we didn't get that out of the team. Another disappointing performance at home in front of the home crowd. But that's kind of what we've grown to expect out of this team. We started with high expectations at the beginning of the season, Super Bowl and all that stuff, and nothing could be further from the truth. Joe Burrow, after the game, says playoffs are the furthest thing on his mind. So as fans, we're going to have to readjust our expectations. So on that bright note, if you're brand new to this podcast, welcome in. And it's not always this sad and depressing, but you can go back and check out some of the previous episodes. Episode 0, I explained who I am, why I'm making this podcast. As I mentioned, sometimes when the team is on a 3-game losing streak like they are again, it's difficult to remind yourself, why am I recording this podcast again? Couldn't I be doing something else with my time? Certainly not making any money off this podcast because there's no ads, no advertisements. You won't have to worry about that. No advertisements, because I love podcasts, but I hate ads. So I won't belittle you with gambling advice or anything like that. But what I would say is I've been following this team since childhood, since I could barely remember what football even was. And you're going to have ups and downs. So this is one of those down seasons. It's sinking in at this point. And normally on the podcast, I try to go through all the positive things I can think of and recap, bring out all the positive things I can mention. And I'll be sure to mention the positives as they come along in this episode, but I'm not feeling overly positive today. I'm not going to lie. This is the 8th loss of the season, and any legitimate hopes for Super Bowl, playoffs, championships, anything like that are going down the drain rapidly. So I'm just going to play it by ear, and instead I'm going to just shoot from the hip and tell you what I really think as much as I can respectfully. I'm not going to go crazy, and say like everybody should be fired and everybody should be cut, etc., etc. But realistically, there wasn't a lot to be excited about in this game. Yeah, they scored a lot of points, but like I said, most of it felt like it was in garbage time where the Steelers weren't really. I mean, this game, you could say it definitely wasn't a game for people who like defense. That's for sure. There was not a lot of good defense being played by either team in this game, and it was very sloppy in terms of penalties. Both teams had over 100 yards of penalties in this game. So just not a very disciplined game, not especially good to watch. Like, I wouldn't call this a great game of football, not just because the Bengals lost, but just neither team was playing especially well. But the only, the player who was standing out, unfortunately, was the quarterback for the other team, Bengals. The quarterback for the Steelers, Russell Wilson, he's been in the league this is his 13th season now, and he completed more yards. This is the second most yards he's ever had in a game in his NFL career. His 13-year career, Bengals gave up the second most yards he's ever been able to complete. So that just shows you how Bengals defense this year makes almost every quarterback they play look like an MVP, like has the most yards of their career. They look like an MVP. I'm thinking about Lamar Jackson twice against the Bengals defense. Jaden Daniels, rookie, setting records in terms of completions percentage against the Bengals defense. Basically, any quarterback who wasn't total garbage, somehow they even lost to Jacoby Brissett, who isn't playing for the Patriots anymore. But Daniel Jones, they shut him down, but he got cut already by the Giants. So, Gardner Minshew for the Raiders, they were able to shut him down. He's out for the season, partially because he got benched, but also because he broke his collarbone. But any quarterback, I guess Mahomes that's the one. Bengals did do a good job of forcing Mahomes into one of the worst games of his career. But outside of that, quarterbacks facing the Bengals defense have been going off. And yesterday was no different in this game. Russell Wilson hit on receptions 10 different Steelers receivers, especially the running backs out of the backfield. So Steelers had 520 yards of offense in this game. That's the most the Steelers have had in over 7 seasons. And the 44 points that the Steelers scored in this game was the most that the Steelers had scored in 7 seasons. So the Bengals defense is just giving up prolific numbers to the Steelers offense that wasn't supposed to be that great. It was supposed to be the Steelers defense that was their strength. And the Bengals, to their credit on offense, put up 38 points against a good Steelers defense. So offensively, things are looking good. But again, the Bengals are breaking all these records. Nobody's ever seen a team score the amount of points that the Bengals are scoring on offense, but still losing the game. It's like the Bengals are the first team to do all these amazing things. Like the first team to score more than 33 points in 4 games and lose all of them in a season. Or Joe Burrow is putting up all these amazing statistics. He had another game where he had over 300 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. Joe Burrow did have 3 turnovers in this game. That was the critical margin of difference, if you could say anything, was the turnovers that Joe Burrow committed. But still, 300 yards, 3 touchdown passes for Joe Burrow. He still was out there making insane plays, playing his nuts off, even when he wasn't getting good blocking from the offensive line up front. Joe Burrow was falling over, bending sideways, making touchdown passes. He was doing everything he could. Even when he got cleated and gashed up, Joe Burrow said he was bleeding out of his right leg after the first play of the game. Somebody caught him with a cleat, apparently. So that's something to watch. But Joe Burrow, despite all that, was playing as much and as well as he could. Unfortunately, Steelers actually, on defense, did a good job of keeping Jamar Chase mostly in check. Mike Tomlin, during the week, he talked about how he watched the 2 Ravens games and saw what a big impact Jamar Chase had in those 2 games. So it made sense that Steelers defense was going to do everything they could to double cover, triple cover, have all eyes, making sure that Jamar Chase was not the player that was going to beat them. So anybody but Jamar Chase, that was kind of the Steelers' defensive plan. And even then, T. Higgins was able to make some plays, kind of an up and down day from T. Higgins. He made some plays, had a couple drops in the game as well, but other players around Joe Burrow was stepping up. But we saw not great offensive line play from the Bengals, especially Orlando Brown Jr., who did return to this game at left tackle, but he was obviously struggling, laboring throughout this game. He just was not able to move like his normal self. He looked like a player who was still dealing with some type of an injury. So I think it's one of those situations. Zach Taylor in his press conference today mentioned Orlando. They had kept him out even though he wanted to play. He wants to be out there. He wants to contribute, doesn't want to be on the sidelines. And maybe it was a situation where they're trying to save him from himself. But you could really see he wasn't effective. He was giving up sacks, pressures, just couldn't move. And there was a number of times he got called for false starts where Orlando Brown would be moving like a half a second before the ball was snapped on offense. Sometimes the officials called it, sometimes they didn't. They let him get away with it. It wasn't consistent throughout the game. I mean, they could have called, false start at least 5 times. They showed on CBS. They had like a montage of all these false start penalties he was doing throughout the game. So maybe he was trying to compensate for that injury, get a little bit of a head start, knowing that he was at a disadvantage going against a younger, faster defensive end up front. Nick Herbig was playing for the Steelers in place of Alex Highsmith, who did not play in this game, still dealing with that ankle injury. So Bengals actually caught a break in not having to play against one of the best players on the Steelers defense. The Steelers did still have TJ Watt, so it was similar way that Steelers defense was taking away Jamar Chase. Bengals offense was making a plan to take away TJ Watt. They were throwing 2 or 3 guys at him every play to block and help with the rookie Amarius Mims at right tackle. They didn't want to leave TJ Watt one-on-one with a rookie at any point throughout this game. So they had Drew Sample, Gesicki, tight end, running back, whoever they could. Chase Brown was putting some hits on TJ Watt. But still, he was able to get a couple hits on Joe Burrow, got a strip sack on a play where, as good as Joe Burrow played in this game, I felt like he lost awareness of TJ Watt for just a second. Scrambling out to TJ Watt's side, he only had one hand on the ball. TJ Watt came from behind, knocked the ball right out of Joe Burrow's hands, and Steelers ended up recovering it, taking it over, and eventually scoring after that. So they weren't able to completely shut down TJ Watt, but one of the other defensive players up front, defensive Hall of Famers for the Steelers, Cam Hayward, continued to play at a high level. Maybe, I don't know, I haven't watched every Steelers game to know if this is his best game of the season, but he was making plays, got a sack on Joe Burrow, tipped a pass from Joe Burrow that ended up turning into an interception for the Steelers, and he made a play down near the goal line where it was like 1st and goal from the 1-yard line. Cam Hayward just blew past Orlando Brown Jr., jumped over top of him actually, and blew up Chase Brown for like a 4-yard loss in the backfield. Just planted him in the ground. Huge play. And so just plays like that the Bengals tried to change it up. They had Cody Ford playing left guard instead of Cordell Volson, because Cordell Volson has been just eaten alive in his career by Cam Hayward. I think it was the first game of Cordell Volson's career, first snap of his NFL career, he went up against Cam Hayward, and I think either Cam Hayward just did a bull rush or completely just threw Cordell Volson out of the way, but it was like a loss immediately. Welcome to the NFL, first snap of your NFL career for Cordell Volson. So Zach Taylor, in his press conference, he's never going to throw his players under the bus or say anything negative, so he said, it was more that Cody Ford earned the opportunity to play, and it wasn't anything that Cordell Volson did wrong. But also, you could spin it around and say Cordell Volson has consistently been one of the worst left guards in the NFL this year. So it couldn't get any worse, so you might as well put Cody Ford in there. And Cody Ford didn't play great, but he played about as good as Cordell Volson, and he was going up against Cam Hayward. So who knows how bad Cordell Volson would have been in there if it wasn't Cody Ford. Who knows? So I can't say it was a bad decision. Maybe we'll probably see more Cody Ford at left guard going forward if they made that switch during the bye week and it seemed to work. But who knows, if Orlando Brown isn't able to play, they might have to move Cody Ford back out to left tackle, or they could put in one of these other backup offensive linemen and give them a shot and see if they're any better than Cordell Volson. I think what they want to do is get the best 5 players they can get on offensive line out there, and if that's Cordell Volson, Orlando Brown, or whoever it is, they're going to play. So that'll be something to watch going forward. But Zach Taylor always talks about what a great opportunity they have. Oh, we still got lots of opportunities in front of us. But now there's only, this is going into week 14, so there's only 5 more games left, and so there's not a lot of opportunities left. They're going to be playing Dallas Cowboys on Monday Night Football. So that is an opportunity to play on a big stage in front of a national TV audience, playing against the most popular NFL team out there. So there's going to be a lot of eyeballs. There's an opportunity to play in front of a big stage, yes. But Zach Taylor was like, but also there's going to be an opportunity to evaluate the players going forward. Because Zach Taylor is having to change up his messaging because there's such a stark contrast between what Zach Taylor, the head coach, and what Joe Burrow, the quarterback, says after the game. Zach Taylor, after the game, nothing changes in his message. It's always consistently, we got the right guys, we got the right people, we're on the right track, we just got to get it turned around, we're just one play away, blah, blah, blah. Joe Burrow is much more realistic when they ask him questions, and he's much more thoughtful. That's the thing that stands out to me about Joe Burrow is Joe Burrow gives real answers. When they ask Joe Burrow a question in these post-game conferences, he sits back and he even he was like stroking his chin Sunday after the game, thinking, like the thinker pose, like really pondering. They asked him, what happened in this game? What went wrong? Why didn't you come out on top? What could you have done better? Because he was saying, basically, at this point, they know as an offense, they've got to play perfect or they're going to lose. And so he was like, what could you do better? He's like, well, there were some false start penalties, including one on Cody Ford. So that wasn't great, but there were some false start penalties. There was some passes we missed, some blocks we missed, this, that, and the other thing. But he was going through and just really introspectively thinking about it. And the thing I like about Joe Burrow is they ask him a question and then he'll pause, think about it, ponder what he's going to say. And so you think you're getting a thoughtful response. On the complete opposite end of the spectrum is head coach Zach Taylor. Whenever they ask him a question, it's like he's already got the answer coming out of his mouth before the reporter can finish their question. Because he's already got his just rote response already lined up. He's already got his answer already queued up of what he's just going to blurt out. They say, Zach, what's the message? Oh, I already know the message. The message is stick together. We're going to hang in there together, block out the noise. We're going to get this thing turned around. We're going to get the momentum, etc., cliche, over and over. It's just the same repetition over and over again. And so during the game, Charles Davis, one of the CBS color announcers, he was like, we talked to this coaching staff, and this isn't the first time that the CBS, this specific crew, has called a Bengals game this season. So they've talked to the same head coaches multiple times. And so Charles Davis was saying, Zach Taylor last time was saying how we need more consistency in the defense, and we're one play away, we just got to get some momentum, blah, blah, blah. And this time he was saying a lot of the same things about how they got to get it turned around and get some momentum and blah, blah, blah. And Charles Davis even said, you can't just keep saying it. You can't just keep talking about it. Eventually you have to go out and prove it on the field. You have to, you can't just talk about it. You have to be about it. And I was like, thank you, Charles Davis. That's what I've been saying this entire time. Because we never get any change of the messaging from Zach Taylor, even after they lose 3 games in a row. It's still positive. We're just going to get some momentum and turn this thing around. And we're still in the driver's seat to have a really special season. It's like, dude, you can't just keep saying that over and over and over. But then the results on the field never change. You keep going out there and losing. And then now the new thing is accountability. Zach's saying, well, we're accountable for that. We're going to take accountability. How? In what ways? I guess, benching Cordell Volson is being accountable, but like what other changes are being made to hold people accountable for this record? And he's even getting some questions now from the reporters, to their credit, are finally wising up and saying, hey, Zach, obviously the Bengals defense is the problem. The Bengals offense is going out there and putting up more points than ever, and you're the head coach and play caller, so you're taking all the credit for that offensively, which is fine. But defense is giving up, the only team that is giving up more points is the Carolina Panthers this year. Bengals defense is giving up second most points in the NFL, and so that's why they're losing these games. It's not like that complicated. They're just defense isn't good. As good as the offense is, defense is even worse. And I should point out, to be fair, Bengals middle linebacker Logan Wilson, number 55, did not play in this game. And that is a crucial loss for this team because almost you would say he's like the quarterback of the Bengals defense. He is really the quarterback because he is the one that had the speaker in his helmet, the green dot from defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo, who's calling in the plays to that defensive captain. That was Logan Wilson. He was out with a knee injury, didn't practice, and so this was the first game of the season that he missed. And so now they had Akeem Davis-Gaither and Joe Bacci step in there in his place, and the results were not nearly as good as when Logan Wilson was out there. Bunch of missed tackles, guys out of position. This is probably where the running backs and tight ends for the Steelers were just so wide open over the middle of the field. You would expect that's where Logan Wilson would have normally been. But instead, there was just wide open space for Russell Wilson to complete passes to all day, it seemed like. And just play after play, time after time, Najee Harris, Cordero Patterson, Jaylen Warren, whoever was in there at running back for the Steelers, they would basically just release up the middle and they'd be just standing there wide open with their, like, waving their arms at Russell Wilson. Hey, throw me the ball. Nobody's over here. And then they'd have like 5 yards before anybody touched them. That was like the Steelers play yesterday. It was just like snap it, wait for the guy to stand in the middle of the field wide open and then throw it to him. And it didn't seem to matter whether the Bengals played man-to-man or zone coverage. Either way, guys were just wide open in the Bengals defense. So some of that could have been due to Logan Wilson. And it certainly didn't help to have him out of this game. But getting back to what I was going to say, finally, the reporters were asking Zach Taylor, hey, are you going to take any responsibility for the defense? What are you doing specifically to help the defense? Because you are the head coach. You are responsible for the entire team, not just the offense. And so Zach just kind of gave a generic, non-specific answer about, well, of course, I'm the head coach. I'm responsible for everything. So I spend a little bit of the time on, all parts of the team. And whenever there's somebody or some area that needs help, I definitely, get in there. But he never really said what exactly he's doing with the defense. He just said, adding his thoughts and feedback or whatever to the defensive coordinator. But everybody knows that he basically has no hand in the defense at all. And so it's easy to pass all the blame off onto the defensive coordinator. But other teams have head coaches who aren't just strictly on one side or the other. Like the Ravens, for example, or the Steelers in this game. Like Mike Tomlin isn't just an offensive or a defensive head coach. He's the head coach of the entire team. He talks to all of the players on all of the sides. So I don't see Zach Taylor going over and talking to the defense much, if at all. And when I do, it's Trey Hendrickson telling Zach Taylor to get out of my face. I don't want to hear whatever you're trying to say to me. So I don't necessarily know that Zach Taylor, he might not have lost the locker room on the offense, but defense, I don't know if Zach Taylor has much of a message to the defense or if they're listening to the message that's coming from the coaching staff at all. I don't know. They don't really talk to the defensive players much after these games. We mostly just hear from Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins because they did positive things in the game. They scored touchdowns. So there's something good from them to talk about. But still, after the game, Jamar Chase, when they were asking him about, like, what do you guys need to do? He was just like, I don't know, man, ask the coaches. Because what else is he going to say at this point? Like, he can't go out there and scheme up the defense, just like Joe Burrow can't go out there and play defense and tackle these guys. Like, he can't do everything. They're doing everything they can on offense. They scored, the Cam Taylor-Britt scored a pick-6 interception return for a touchdown on the Bengals' first defensive series. So that was a good play that the defense made in this game. And especially for Cam Taylor-Britt, like I said, he really needed that kind of a play because of getting benched in the previous game. So that was good. But outside of that, Bengals defense really didn't do much of anything to stop the Steelers. And so we would say that the Bengals offense scored 31 points. We got the 7 because of the Cam Taylor pick 6. Bengals offense scored 31. Steelers, they also had a defensive touchdown on a strip sack fumble where Orlando Brown couldn't even get out of his stance before Nick Herbert came in and stripped it. So Steelers defense also scored 7. We'll say Steelers scored, I'll do the math in my head, 37 on offense. Had a couple field goals in there. So offensively, Steelers still won 37-31. But I just got to remind myself as a fan, I know that they're not trying to lose. Like, they're putting in the effort, they're practicing, they're doing the preparation, unless they're Jermaine Burton, maybe they're at the casino. But otherwise, they're probably doing the preparation to get ready for the game, to go out and theoretically win if possible. They're not trying to lose, so I'm not mad at them for losing. It's just disappointing. And Zach Taylor said, yeah, we all feel like we got kicked in the gut and we feel sick about it and we're all torn up inside. But that doesn't help me. Like, that doesn't make me feel any better. I still feel depressed, disappointed after the team loses the third game in a row, especially to the Steelers at home. But why should I be surprised? They said on the broadcast, since 2002 in Cincinnati, Steelers are 21-4, which is insane. I think they said that's like the, whichever way you want to think about it, best or worst record for a divisional opponent at home. Like, the Bengals, their record against the Steelers is like the worst in the NFL against a divisional opponent at their own stadium. So it's crazy how the Steelers have dominated the Bengals in their own stadium in front of their own fans. They really relish coming into Paul Brown Stadium or Paycor Stadium and just laying a loss on the Bengals. And you got the terrible towels in there from the Steelers fans who do travel. There's a bunch of Steelers fans everywhere. So they were, of course, hooping and hollering in this game. Let's get into the actual game recap. Quickly, succinctly, try to go over some of the big plays that happened in this game. Try to give you the recap if you missed it and for some reason don't want to go back and watch it yourself. But Bengals in this game, it was a crisp December 1st day. Sunny out though. Lots of sun on that visitor side of the stadium. Almost blindingly so. I would think you need some sunglasses if you're going to sit out because it's not a dome, not an indoor stadium. But there was 66,000 mostly Bengals fans, some Steelers fans there, but it was a full stadium. So despite the Bengals' record and their 2-game losing streak they were coming in on, fans were still showing up to the game with their money and their expectations running high. But Bengals, I think, must have lost the opening coin toss, so they received the ball first in the first quarter. And Jermaine Burton was returning kicks and had a few decent punt returns. He got the first, and the ball was not traveling that far in the air because it was about 32 or around 30 degrees for most of the game. So air a little bit heavier, not traveling that far. Burton got the opening kick off out to the 37-yard line. That's where Bengals took over. But unfortunately, first drive ended with a 3-and-out and a punt. Didn't really go anywhere. There was a false start penalty. This is the first false start penalty by Orlando Brown Jr. of the game. Moved the ball back into 3rd and 16. They got a short pass for 13 yards, but had to punt it away. So not an ideal start for the Bengals on their first drive. But Bengals' first drive on defense was actually pretty promising. First play didn't really go, and it was kind of a bang-bang hit where Akeem Davis-Gaither was trying to cover a pass deep over the middle, and he hit the receiver like just a fraction of a second before the ball arrived, so it was defensive pass interference. The ball actually hit Akeem Davis-Gaither in the back, so if he had turned around and looked for where the ball was, he probably could have intercepted it. But since he didn't turn around and made contact, it was just, if he had got there maybe a little bit later, it would have been the perfect timing. He tried to time it up right when the ball got there, just got there a little bit early. But that was okay. that made it a 1st and 10 at the Pittsburgh 38 after an incomplete pass. Russell Wilson threw a pass that was intended for George Pickens to the right on a quick slant, but right when he threw it, you could see George Pickens looked like he kind of stumbled and fell down. Cam Taylor-Britt was right behind him, and so he was still standing there, caught the ball, ran back, almost got caught by one of the Steelers' offensive linemen, but managed to avoid him, ran all the way in for a pick six interception, returned for a touchdown. But like I said, it looked weird why George Pickens would just fall down. And then when they went back and showed it on replay, what actually happened was Cam Taylor-Britt was actually, it was maybe George Pickens might have stumbled a little bit, but he had Cam Taylor-Britt beat to the inside. Cam Taylor-Britt put his right hand out and to grab George Pickens and pull him along with him on the route. But what he actually grabbed was the back of George Pickens' head. And so he kind of grabbed George Pickens by the head and threw him on the ground. The referees, from their angle, couldn't see it. And after the game, they said they just thought it was maybe their feet got tangled up and incidental contact. And basically said, like, if there was a hold, we didn't see it. And it was kind of like one of those explanations for the Sam Darnold face mask penalty against, I think it was the Los Angeles Rams, where it was an obvious face mask penalty, but the referee couldn't see it, so they didn't call it, so it doesn't count, and you have to go on to the next play. Same thing from the Steelers' perspective. It was an obvious penalty on Cam Taylor-Britt, but because the referees didn't see it, it doesn't count, so it was a good play for the Bengals. It kind of reminded me of one of the T. Higgins touchdowns in the Super Bowl where he face masked Jalen Ramsey, basically threw the defender on the ground before the ball got there. And then so he was able to just catch the ball, run in for a touchdown. Referees didn't see it, didn't call it, so nobody is going to remember that. It doesn't go down in the history books as an asterisk because it should have been a penalty on T. Higgins. It's like it just counts as a touchdown for T. Higgins, and however you want to grade that, you can't necessarily, if you're Cam Taylor-Britt, if you're the coach, you don't want to coach that and say, grab guys by the head and throw them on the ground every play. It happened to work out. He didn't get called for it, so it worked out in his favor this time. But I wouldn't try to get away with that. And George Pickens, he got his in this game, so it was a great start for the Bengals to get out in front because they didn't have a great start on offense, but the defense scoring points, something they have not been able to do. They haven't been able to get many interceptions or turnovers at all. I think that's the first time a Bengals player has had multiple interceptions this season. Cam Taylor-Britt has now got 2. That was the highest on the team before. That's the highest on the team. Everybody else has 1, if they even have 1 at all. So, promising start for the Bengals. However, Steelers obviously get the ball right back since the Bengals were just on defense and then they scored. Steelers get the ball back and promptly march the ball all the way down the field. 7 plays, 70 yards, ending off in a 17-yard touchdown to George Pickens on the left side, where just bad tackling by Bengals on defense, including Cam Taylor-Britt, where it was basically just a wide receiver screen out to the left. They got some blocking from the other receivers on the Bengals defensive backs. Nobody came up to tackle George Pickens. Jordan Battle was playing in this game, I think they said, in place of Von Bell at safety. He was late, as usual, coming over, trying to tackle. It was almost a carbon copy of the George Pickens touchdown he had last season against the Bengals. Jordan Battle coming over late, not able to get there at the goal line. So George Pickens kicking up his heels in Jordan Battle's face as he scores. But this drive was a lot of Najee Harris, the running back, and dump-offs over the middle. One was for 25 yards, but Bengals not making great tackles. Positive plays all the way down the field. Steelers got into 1 third down, but otherwise they were just picking up first down after first down. That made it a tie game. Bengals got the ball back, and they responded with their own 6-play, 75-yard touchdown drive. The biggest plays, this is the Chase Brown drive where they got a couple first downs, or they got 1 first down, and then Chase Brown broke off a 13-yard run off right guard, and then a 40-yard run that almost was a touchdown. He got to the half-yard line, but Chase Brown finally busted off one of those long runs that he had been trying to get all season. I think his longest run of the season might have been only 18 or 20 yards. Hadn't got a long one, even though he had just gotten tripped up by that last guy. But this time he finally was able to get out in the open field, almost got in for the touchdown, but got stopped just short. But then next play, Chase Brown finished it off for a 1-yard touchdown. Bengals retook the lead at 14-17, headed into the second quarter. Or actually, not quite into the second quarter. There's still 5 minutes left to go in the first quarter. There's a lot of action in this game. It's kind of a longer game, but Steelers got the ball back down by 7. They respond. Another touchdown drive from the Steelers. 10 plays, 70 yards. There was it was weird because the Steelers would pick up yards and then they would get penalties. So there was a first down. George Pickens picked up 21 yards. Then George Pickens got a 15-yard taunting penalty where he got up over Jermaine Pratt and dropped the ball on him and in your face. I just got a first down. So a taunting penalty, obviously can't do that. Then there was a delay of game penalty on the Steelers, but they were able to just keep moving the ball. Cordell Patterson came into the game at this point because Najee Harris I don't know what he was dealing with, maybe just being out of shape or being out of breath. He said he had too much dessert from Pat Fryermuth's girlfriend at Thanksgiving. I don't know what was going on with Najee Harris. They showed him getting oxygen on the sidelines, but he was getting a lot of action early in the game, and then he came back later, but maybe he got cramps. I don't know what happened. He said he had some oranges, and then he felt better. Maybe he had a stomach ache. Not sure what was going on with Najee Harris, but it didn't matter. Whoever the Steelers put in the game, they were successful, moved it all the way down the field, and ended up scoring another touchdown to make it a tie game, 14-14. Actually, maybe I'm getting totally confused on this, but Steelers, okay, so second touchdown the Steelers scored was to Calvin Austin over Mike Hilton, 23-yard pass from Russell Wilson it must have been their third drive, so sorry if I was confused. First touchdown of the Steelers was George Pickens, got it back to 7-all. Then the Steelers got it to 14-all with the touchdown to Calvin Austin. Bengals came back with their own touchdown to go ahead again. So it was back and forth. Bengals were always, in the first half at least, jumping out ahead, and the Steelers were the ones that were keeping up with the Bengals. Bengals had another 6-play, 75-yard drive. Oh, that was the Chase Brown. Sorry, I'm going through the next drive. Bengals had a bunch of penalties, or there were a bunch of penalties on both teams, and there was an offensive holding penalty on Drew Sample. There was a defensive pass interference penalty on Joey Porter. Joey Porter actually had 2 defensive pass interfering or holding and multiple penalties on the same drive. He had a rough day, Steelers, for defense. He was going up against T. Higgins, and that's a rough matchup. But T. Higgins is, as we know, as I just talked about, T. Higgins is notorious for getting his hands all over the defender. So it was kind of a back and forth. T. Higgins did a good job of not getting called for offensive pass interference. Sometimes he does get called for that, but he did a good job of getting away with it and getting penalties on the Steelers in this case. But this was a case where they got it down to goal to go at the 1-yard line after one of those defensive pass interference penalties on Andre Iosivas this time. Not T. Higgins, but Iosivas was open in the back of the end zone. The ball from Burrow was probably going to go over his head, but Joey Porter Jr. panicked, just basically tackled Iosivas before the ball got there. Then the next play, that was where Cam Hayward blew up the play, 3-yard loss, tackling Chase Brown in the backfield, where Orlando Brown basically just tried to dive at Cam Hayward's feet. Cam Hayward just jumped over him and made the tackle in the backfield. But after that, Joe Burrow was scrambling around, falling down, finds Jamar Chase in the back of the end zone for a 4-yard touchdown after the extra point from Evan McPherson, which he was good on his extra points, 5 for 5 on extra points. Bengals went up 21-14 with 9.5 minutes left to go in the second quarter. Of course, at this point, Steelers, they respond again with another touchdown drive of their own to tie it up at 21 apiece. This was another drive marred by penalties. This time, There was a penalty on, it was assessed to Cam Taylor-Britt for a face mask. I think it might have been Akeem Davis-Gaither on this one. But it was in the box score I'm looking at, it says Cam Taylor-Britt with the face mask. But that moved the ball down the field for the Steelers. And then there was a penalty on Mike Hilton for an unnecessary roughness in this drive, where it was one of those things where, the second guy always gets called for it. The first guy who instigates the fight or whatever, takes a swing at somebody, the referees never see them, but they see the second guy who retaliates. So that was Mike Hilton in this case, moved the ball even further into Cincinnati territory. And then Najee Harris ran off left tackle for 10 yards for a touchdown. Didn't really get a lot of resistance from the Bengals defense, especially defensive line like Sam Hubbard, B.J. Hill, Joseph Osai, all those guys up front. They're really not getting much of a push. McKinley Jackson, Chris Jenkins, those guys aren't really showing up. Didn't hear their names called a lot in this game. So at that point, it's 21-21, and there's about 7 minutes left to go in the second quarter. This is going to be an important moment in the drive because Steelers are going to get the ball after halftime. So the Bengals want to possess it and, if possible, score points without letting the Steelers touch the ball again before halftime, because Zach Taylor, he buys into the concept of momentum. So he feels like if the other team is able to score before halftime and then score right again after halftime, 2 scores in a row, that'll give the team extra momentum against you or whatever. But unfortunately for the Bengals, at this point in the game, critical moment in the game, tie game, this is where Joe Burrow, it's in Steelers territory because they got good field position after a good kickoff return from Jermaine Burton. They pick up a couple first downs, including a pass to Andre Iosivas. Tanner Hudson gets involved. But then Joe Burrow tries to scramble out to the right. TJ Watt comes from behind. Tomahawk slams the ball out of Burrow's hands. It gets recovered by Peyton Wilson. And luckily he's not able to return it for a touchdown. But that was where Bengals were in position to get some points on the board and take the lead again. Unfortunately, Steelers got points off of this turnover. They didn't score a touchdown, luckily. But on the first play of the Steelers drive, 4.5 minutes left to go in the second quarter, they got 29 yards on a Jaylen Warren catch and run up the middle. A lot of missed tackles. Again, anytime it seemed like a running back caught the ball in the middle of the Bengals defense, he was bound to at least break 1 tackle, maybe 2. But guys were just running free. Bengals, to their credit, managed to force a few incomplete passes. Josh Newton, maybe like his only good play of the day, broke up a pass to George Pickens. So the Steelers had to settle for a 50-yard field goal from Chris Boswell, which was good. That gave the Steelers their first lead of the day at 24-21. And I should remind everybody, because I should have at the beginning, that the Bengals were actually favored to win in this game. Despite the records going into this, Bengals were 2.5 to 3-point favorites at home going into this game against the Steelers. But at this point, Steelers are up by 3. Bengals get the ball back, and this is another 3-and-out punt. Ugly, and it was a tough call on this one because Bengals got it to 3rd and short, and then it was incomplete, and then 4th and inches, basically. They tried to draw the Steelers off sides with a hard count from Joe Burrow, tried to get him to jump, and it looked like one of the Steelers defenders jumped into the neutral zone. It would have been a neutral zone infraction penalty on the Steelers, and Alex Kappa reacted to it, and it should be the rule is if the defender is in the neutral zone, if he makes the offensive player jump, it's still a penalty on the defense. For some reason, referees didn't see it that way. They said it was a false start on Cincinnati. That moved them back, and they had to punt. Everybody was booing and going crazy, and Zach Taylor was losing his mind, saying, "No way, blah, 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 I can't call that kind of penalty." But, it goes, sometimes calls go for you, sometimes they go against you. Like, I said with the Cam Taylor-Britt interception, that was the penalty that didn't get called, and maybe it should have, but it worked out in the Bengals' favor. So I didn't hear a bunch of boos and everybody complaining about that. So sometimes it goes for you, sometimes it goes against you. But of course, like after the game, Jeff Hobson, the writer for the Bengals team, he was making a big stink about this play, like it was the turning point in the game. And if they had called that on the Steelers, you guys could have gone and scored points before halftime, would have totally changed the game. And, this was the thing that's flipped all the momentum in the Steelers' favor. And if it weren't for this penalty, you guys would have won. And maybe, that's some way you want to console yourself. Fine, go ahead. I know that's what Jeff has to do because he works for the team. So he's got to take their side of it and try to spin it that way. But I wouldn't necessarily buy into one penalty one way or the other. You just got to go out there and dominate. You can't complain about calls going against you here or there. You're not going to get every call. Everything isn't going to go your way. So I wouldn't say this one penalty was the thing that turned it all on its head. But because of this, the Steelers were able to get the ball back around 2 minutes left to go before halftime. They drove it again all the way down the field. No negative plays, no plays even under. The shortest play that the Steelers had on this drive was 6 yards. It was 8 yards, 6 yards, 8 yards, 17 yards, 6 yards, 6 yards, 14 yards, and then a field goal because they ran out of time. But at that rate, the only thing that was stopping them was the clock. It definitely wasn't the Bengals defense. That was another 34-yard field goal where that put the Steelers up by 6 going into halftime, 27-21. But at this point, there's so many points up on the board. I'm thinking to myself, man, this game might end up being like 50-45 or something like that. So many points. It wasn't far off. There's a lot of points scored in this game. But the difference was Russell Wilson had like 250 yards passing by halftime, and Joe Burrow only barely had over 100, like 105 or 110, something like that. So a lot more yards for the Steelers, and it was kind of deceptive with the points because for the Bengals, 7 of those came from the defense. Cam Taylor-Britt's interception returned for a touchdown. So Bengals offensively really only scored on 2 of their drives, 2 touchdowns. That made it feel like maybe it was a little bit closer in terms of what the Bengals were able to do compared to the Steelers' offense. But after halftime, Bengals defense came out and responded. Steelers drove the ball down inside Bengals territory, but they forced a stop on 3rd and 8, forced the Steelers into a 42-yard field goal, which was blocked by number 58, Joseph Ossai. He did a good job splitting between I think it was the center and the guard, or the guard and the tackle, split the gap, jumped in, blocked the kick with bare hands, and it's cold outside, so I know that had a sting on his bare hands getting hit with that ball, but he blocked it. That was a huge play to give the ball back to the Bengals, and they were able to convert that into a 12-play, 48-yard drive that ended in a field goal. Unfortunately, they couldn't punch it in and take the lead again with a touchdown, but they were able to convert it into a points off of that defensive stop. So first couple possessions after halftime were looking promising for the Bengals, even though they weren't able to regain the lead. They weren't folding up the tent and giving up either. And it was a positive in the fact that Evan McPherson, who had missed those 2 field goals in the previous game against the Chargers, made this kick. It was a little bit close because he was hooking at the end. It was a 38-yard field goal. If it had been from 48, I don't know if this kick would have been good, but it was luckily the distance was close enough that he was able to get the ball in there. But it was a little bit dicey on this McPherson kick. Hopefully, maybe it was the wind. I don't know, but we'll see if Evan is able to make some longer kicks when we need him to. So the Steelers take over with about 4 minutes left to go in the third quarter, leading by 3 points over the Bengals. They're able to move the ball down the field. There was a penalty on the Bengals defense, too many men on the field, so that gave the Steelers some more yardage. They picked up a first down. Technically, the Bengals picked up a sack, but it was more like Russell Wilson scrambling around and then slid for a 1-yard loss. Joseph Ossai got credit for the sack. Trey Hendrickson was trying to jump in there at the last minute and get half a sack. He's always trying to get sack stats so he can, get a new contract, get paid more. But it's just kind of cheap. Like Trey Hendrickson, would you just play the game and instead of trying to like pump up your statistics, but because Trey Hendrickson didn't really have much of an impact. They took him out of the game. I don't think he had a sack in this game, no strips. So I don't know, maybe a couple tackles in the run game, but Trey Hendrickson was neutralized. Steelers did a good job. Russell Wilson did a good job of staying away from him. And Steelers ended up picking the Bengals defense apart. At this point, it seemed like maybe they had switched from man-to-man to zone. And so the Steelers were picking apart the Bengals zone. This was also when Ben Skowronek was in the game, catching passes from Russell Wilson. It finally ended in a 25-yard pass to Pat Freiermuth, tight end over the middle. 25-yard touchdown where Freiermuth just found an open spot in the Bengals zone defense, caught it completely wide open, turned around and ran right into the end zone almost untouched because nobody was around him to tackle him from the Bengals defense. And it was hard to tell because it's a Steelers player going in to score named Freiermuth. So all the Steelers fans say Muth, they're chanting Muth. But it also could have been the Bengals fans booing because it was the Steelers scoring a touchdown. So I couldn't tell. Maybe it was a combination of both. It could have been a combination of boos and Muth at the same time. But either way, wasn't a good outcome for the Bengals at that point in the game. After the made extra point, Steelers ended up going up by 10, 34-24. I think this may have been one of the drives, or it may have been earlier in the game, where Cam Taylor-Britt had a hit on Calvin Austin, one of the Steelers wide receivers, who also scored a touchdown earlier in the game and also got hit by Keem Davis-Gaither on the first offensive play of the game. Cam Taylor-Britt, they were playing in that zone defense, or I guess Zach Taylor said it was a zero blitz look. But Cam Taylor-Britt was playing the short flat, and he wasn't in position to make a play on the ball. So his only play was to basically wait until the receiver caught it and then hit him and try to hit him so hard that the ball popped out. He hit him hard enough to give him a concussion, but it was still a catch. And so Cam Taylor-Britt got up and flexed over this guy. But the guy that he hit was 175 pounds soaking wet. He's basically the smallest guy on the field at the time. And Cam Taylor-Britt outweighs him by at least 20 pounds. So he's getting up and flexing over this guy on the Steelers sidelines. You got to be careful with that kind of stuff because they have to play the Steelers again later this season. So, if you take a hit high on a game, I don't know if Cam Taylor-Britt is going to be fined for this hit because they didn't throw a flag on it for unnecessary roughness or hitting a defenseless receiver in the head or anything like that. But I wouldn't be surprised if he did get a fine because the guy was out of the game for the rest of the game with a head injury after this hit. So, for the Bengals, you can say, yeah, it's a good play, good hit on the guy. As just a football fan and a former wide receiver, I wouldn't necessarily say that's a great play. You're hitting a guy who's smaller than you, who's not looking. It's not really that tough of a play or that challenging. I would rather see, how about making a play on the ball? Instead of just waiting, instead of giving him so much separation that the guy is able to make the catch and secure it, what about making a play on the ball, knocking the ball down before the guy can catch it? What about that? But Cam Taylor-Britt gives up so much separation on these routes. That's never really in option. That's never really in the cards for Cam Taylor-Britt. He's never close enough to swat the ball down. The only thing he can do is hit the receiver after the ball gets there. But anyway, at this point, Bengals are down by 10 points. It's not looking good for them. Going into the fourth quarter as the Bengals take over on their drive, they're down by 10 with 1 quarter left to play. Bengals start off the first drive of the fourth quarter, picking up a couple first downs. Everything's looking good. Then they get a false start penalty on Cody Ford, moves them back into 1st and 15. So they're passing. Maybe the Steelers knew, given that situation, Bengals were going to be passing. So Cam Hayward, instead of coming upfield, kind of sits back, waits for Joe Burrow to throw it. He jumps up, deflects the pass. Ball gets deflected, and T. Higgins, who the pass is intended for originally, kind of gets one hand on the deflected pass, which isn't really what you want to do. I know it's just kind of an instinct to reach out with any hands you can get and try to catch the ball. But in this situation, if you're the receiver, you tip the ball up in the air. That's exactly what the defensive back wants, because in this situation, the defensive back is trailing from behind. It's like a lollipop popped up in the air. Easy interception. Good job by T. Higgins being able to get just enough to bring the defender down who made the interception. Jackson, I forget it was his first name, but Jackson, D. Jackson for the Steelers, made the interception. T. Higgins was able to trip him up, and that was a huge play, huge tackle by T. Higgins, because the Steelers ended up having to punt right after this. So it could have been a pick six. It could have been another touchdown if the Steelers had returned this, but good job by T. Higgins making that shoestring tackle to prevent the Steelers from getting points. They ended up having to punt a few plays later. They got a holding penalty that was declined. They had a ineligible man downfield on the Steelers center. I think he must have been confused on the play, because he ran out and tried to block somebody downfield, like 10 yards down the field, like it was a running play. All of his other teammates stayed back to pass block. So it was just like this one guy running out. It was like, wait, what are you doing? That's a penalty. But Steelers ended up having to punt it away to Isaiah Williams for the Bengals. That's a new name Bengals have on the roster. Somebody they picked up off the waiver wire in the bye week. So since Charlie Jones continues to be out with that groin injury, and I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know if Charlie Jones is going to be on the team next year. I know he was a 4th-round draft pick, and he's only in his 2nd year, but he's got one catch this year. He's got that one punt return or kick return against the Browns for a touchdown. Outside of that, he fumbled in the first game against the Patriots. He went backwards and sideways a number of times. He wasn't really that good at returning punts to begin with, and he only had one catch on offense this season, so he hasn't done anything offensively. I know he was a draft pick, and he's still under contract, but like anybody can be better than Charlie Jones, honestly. Like I said, he wasn't even really running that much faster than Joe Burrow on the kick return. So I don't know, Charlie Jones. You're going to have to pick it up. But anyway, Bengals, they forced the Steelers to punt. It was like, okay, they were down by 10. If they had, I can't remember. I think it was this moment in the game. I think it was. So the Bengals were down by 10. It's the 4th quarter. Their season is in the balance. And Charles Davis said at that moment, this is the Bengals season on the line. This drive on defense is going to define the Bengals season. This is make or break time. And Bengals defense forced a punt. So it was like, okay, they keep saying like must win, must do this, is do or die. Finally, for once, in one microcosm of this moment in the game, the Bengals defense got to stop for once. But unfortunately, a few plays later, after the Bengals took over at their own 11-yard line, they got a pass interference penalty on Joey Porter, picked up another first down, ran a couple plays, and then Nick Herbig came around the left side on a pass play. Joe Burrow dropped back to pass, and he didn't have time. He didn't see him. Orlando Brown barely even got a hand on Nick Herbig. And I think he was just injured at this point. He could barely move. He wasn't able to get out of his stance, it didn't even look like. So Herbig went right around him. Right as Joe Burrow cocked his arm back to throw, Herbig swatted the ball out. The ball goes flying over to the right. Gets picked up by Peyton Wilson again. Second fumble he recovered in the game. This time, scoop and score. He ran it all the way back 21 yards for the Steelers' defensive touchdown. That's the second defensive touchdown in the game. That put the Steelers up by 17 points, 41-24, with 11 minutes left to go in the 4th quarter. So that's why I say the score at the end was a little bit deceptive, because at this point, there's 11 minutes left to go in the game. The Steelers are up by 17, and Bengals fans are headed for the exit en masse. A lot of people didn't stick around to see these last 2 touchdowns that the Bengals offense scored. It didn't end up mattering, but I don't necessarily understand that psychology or that logic from fans. If you already spent that much time sitting out in the cold. Maybe that's sort of thing. They're like, man, I'm about to get frostbite if I stay out here any longer. I got to get out of here. But if you're already at the game and you're not going into hypothermia or something, you might as well stay and see what happens. Maybe something cool will happen. You never know. But unfortunately for the Bengals, those fans were right. They did not end up winning the game, but they gave it their best try. So after that strip sack fumble, they came back. They responded with a 7-play, 70-yard drive that only took 2.5 minutes off the clock. The CBS announcers was like, oh, I don't know. They're not really in a hurry-up mode. But, I mean, they scored a touchdown in 2.5 minutes, so that's pretty quick. They gave the ball back to the Steelers with 8.5 minutes left to go, and Bengals still had all their timeouts, plus the 2-minute warning. So it wasn't out of the realm of possibility at that point. They were only down by 10 with 8.5 minutes left to go. So still a 2-score lead, but not impossible. The Steelers on their next drive, they were mostly concerned with running the clock out and just trying to shorten the game, get first downs without having the clock stop too much. So the biggest play in this drive that kind of broke the Bengals' back was a 43-yard pass to Van Jefferson. Russell Wilson had a nice read on Josh Newton, rookie cornerback. For some reason, Josh Newton, number 28 for the Bengals, I don't know if he was trying to guess. It didn't look like the receiver did a double move and faked out, but for some reason he just kind of stopped his feet and reacted like it was going to be a deep out, but it was actually a straight up go in, and so he was beaten badly. Luckily, the Bengals defense was able to rally and tackle, and Mike Hilton and Cam Taylor-Britt brought him down after a 43-yard pickup. But Steelers, they got another defensive holding penalty on Cam Taylor-Britt in the end zone. So Steelers, it looked like they scored a touchdown on the first play, a first and goal from the Bengals 4-yard line. But the referees had a quick whistle. They said forward progress had been stopped, and they were probably right. But the Steelers were upset because at the end of this, they kind of pushed the pile into the end zone, where if the referees hadn't blown the whistle early, could have been a Steelers touchdown. But to the Bengals' credit, they got a couple stops. The Steelers, again, were mostly trying to run the ball and just keep the clock running. They were more concerned with running the clock out than scoring points. So they were just keeping it on the ground. They ended up settling for a field goal to only go up by 13 instead of 17. So that was a win, you could say, by the Bengals defense. The only thing that wasn't great was at this point in the game, there's less than 4 minutes left to go. Bengals are still down by 10. Or I should say down by 13, because the Steelers just kicked the field goal. 4 minutes left to go. Again, Bengals don't give up. That's one thing Zach Taylor said, is they're not quitting. They haven't given up. So it's a 5-play, 64-yard drive, because they do get another good kick return out of Jermaine Burton all the way out to the 36-yard line. So maybe, I don't know, Steelers, they didn't try to change up the strategy, or they just, because of the heavy air, they couldn't kick it through the end zone. Well, obviously, if they could have kicked the touchback, they probably would have preferred that. But either way, it goes out to the 30-yard line. But still, good field position for the Bengals. And then this was where the Bengals finally got Jamar Chase active. He had a few short catches here and there, but hadn't had anything deep. This is finally where they got Jamar Chase out in the open field for a catch and run. Looked like he was almost in range of scoring a touchdown, but he was tackled at the 3-yard line. So that was a 49-yard catch and run. His biggest play, Jamar Chase's biggest play of this game. He was mostly quiet in this game, but like I said, the Steelers did a good job of devoting resources to keep him quiet throughout the game and let T. Higgins go one-on-one with Joey Porter Jr. But Bengals were able to find Andre Iosivas in the back of the end zone for a 3-yard touchdown. I almost had a Chicago accent there for a second. Andre Iosivas for that 3-yard touchdown in the back of the end zone. I don't even know if I mentioned before that there was a T. Higgins touchdown for that 1-yard touchdown in the drive before. So after the Iosivas touchdown and the extra point, that got it back to 38-44 Steelers. At that point, there's 2.5 minutes left to go. Steelers have a 6-point lead. So the Bengals have gotten back to within that one score, because it was 13 points. They got back to within 6 with the touchdown. But Steelers are able to pick up a couple first downs, run out the clock. Bengals are all out of timeouts. They can't stop the clock anymore, so the Steelers are able to take a knee. Justin Fields scrambled for a first down. It didn't really matter. The game was basically over anyway, but Bengals defense got completely fooled. Justin Fields kept it on the zone read, and Charles Davis was saying, I'm sure Lou Anarumo, the defensive coordinator, was yelling, look at Justin Fields, the quarterback. He's going to keep it, and that's exactly what he did. Bengals got completely fooled, eyes in the backfield, let Justin Fields run right around him for the first down. That was the end of the game. 44-38 Steelers. Steelers improved to 9-3 and continue to lead the division of the AFC North, especially because the Ravens lost this weekend. Bengals moved to 4-8, and depending on the outcome of Monday Night Football, they could be at a tie record with the Browns at last place in the AFC North, because the Browns are 3-8 right now. Depending on if they win or lose, they could be tied at 4-8 with the Bengals or go to 3-9. But not the season the Bengals were looking for. At the best, if the Bengals win out, they could be 9-8. If they win every game from here on out, be 9-8 and save a winning season. But the winning season is looking less and less likely, and playoffs are looking even less likely. There's maybe a 1 or 2 chance of making the playoffs because the Raiders, the Ravens, the Broncos, the Colts, bunch of teams have better records than the Bengals, so it's going to be difficult, if not impossible, for the Bengals to get in at this point. After the game, of course, there's lots of questions about what do you have left to play for now that you guys are basically out of it and all that kind of stuff. These reporters are really kind of circling like vultures. Now that the hope and the optimism is long gone, now they're looking for any kind of drama that they can stir up, any kind of controversy. Somebody said something negative about the coach or something like that. Anything they can jump on to try to create division and drama within the team. Just try to get clicks, get eyeballs on whatever story they're writing for their website or whatever it is. But Joe Burrow said that they've got plenty to play for, and he doesn't take for granted the fact that he's an NFL quarterback. He's healthy. He's not standing on the sidelines like he's been in years past. He's able to represent the city, the franchise, the ownership, all that kind of stuff. And he said that now is going to be a test of this team and these players to see who they can count on and who they can't. And that's, again, a difference from what Zach Taylor would say, because Zach Taylor would never admit that maybe there are some guys that they can't count on. Zach Taylor acts like everybody is, all rowing the ship in the same direction, and, we've got the right guys. Everybody's about all the right stuff, and I wouldn't trade these guys for anything. But also, you don't have any other options. You can't trade for any new players at this point in the season. You're not getting any other players anyway, so you don't have any option of replacing the current players with new players, even if you wanted to. So you got to say, oh yeah, these players are great. I love this roster. We don't need to make any changes. And also, you got to remember that who is Zach Taylor speaking to at this point? It's definitely not the fans, because the fans really don't care what Zach Taylor says at all. He's talking to Mike Brown, the ownership, and he's taking the heat. He's biting the bullet, and he's, saying, because he can't say this team that the owner constructed is bad, and it's not my fault as the coach that the owner picked bad players, and the general manager, Duke Tobin, they gave me bad players to play with. So he's not passing the blame on anybody else. He is trying to deflect all the blame and say, oh yeah, the roster that the owner picked out, owner did a good job. In all ways, he's protecting the ownership, protecting his job, basically, so that he's doing everything possible to make Mike Brown and this ownership look like they're doing a competent job. And so as Zach Taylor is doing his job in his mind by, protecting the team and protecting his paycheck, basically protecting his own neck. And I don't fault him for that. Of course, that's what he's going to do. But that's why I don't put any stock into anything Zach Taylor says at this point. So reporters can ask him all the questions they want. He's really not going to give anybody a straight answer. The only answer he's going to give is just, yeah, we're just going to keep fighting, stay in this thing, keep plugging away, get some momentum. And eventually he's just going to say, we're just going to get some momentum for next season, because this season is going to be over. He's going to eventually have to admit that once they finally get eliminated. And then it's going to be, well, we're going to get some momentum for next year. Like, whatever. He knows he's not going anywhere. So that's why it's easy for him to sit there and take all these bullets, because, yeah, fine, whatever. I'll take the heat, but I'm still going to be back next year and the year after that. So it doesn't matter if we win, lose, or draw, I'm going to be back. And as long as I just keep saying the right thing and don't be like totally offensive, I won't get fired. So that's what we have to look forward to as Bengals. Some more mediocre play and maybe a lot of points on offense that we can celebrate. But I don't know what they're going to do on defense. Doesn't seem like much of a plan, if anything. And if they continue to just like bring back Sam Hubbard and Lou Anarumo and like the same players, or imagine if they let Trey Hendrickson go and let Mike Hilton go, and we're left with even worse players on defense. It could be, I mean, that would be amazing to have like the best offense paired with the absolute worst defense. It would be an entertaining team to watch, I guess. Maybe. I don't know. But yeah, that's, I guess, all we have to look forward to the rest of the season. Maybe some of these young guys will start making some plays. Maybe they'll get Jermaine Burton involved finally. Like, he didn't even get in the snaps on offense, as far as I can remember. He didn't get any targets. So I don't know what to expect going forward from the rest of this Bengals team. But next game is going to be on Monday Night Football against the Dallas Cowboys. So that will be a big spotlight. At least they'll be back and somewhat relevant for one more week. After this week, nobody might talk about the Bengals anymore. They're going to move past the whole narrative about Joe Burrow being an MVP, but except for he's on a losing football team. They're just going to start talking about Saquon Barkley or Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes or somebody who's on a good football team, and they're not going to talk about the Bengals and Joe Burrow anymore, which is going to be sad, but I'll still be here putting out podcasts so you can come back and get ready for that next episode. Like I said, if you've listened all the way to the end of this episode, thank you so much. I can't believe you've made it all the way, but if you did, don't forget to subscribe, give me a thumbs up, give me a positive rating, not a negative one. Come on, what's wrong with you? If you listen all this way, you can't be giving me negative ratings. But I'm trying to help promote this podcast in an organic way, because I'm not taking out any ads, because I'm definitely not getting paid for this podcast. But I wanted to be consistent with this podcast, even when the Bengals don't win, because nothing is worse than a podcast that has all these pointless episodes in like the off season about like, oh, we're excited about the draft and we're excited about free agency and all this stuff that doesn't matter. But when the games actually come and the team starts to lose, the podcast disappears. So I'm here, win, lose, or draw, podcasting for you, the listener. I hope you appreciate that. And, you know, sometimes fans from other teams, they want to come in. So maybe if you're a Steelers fan, you want to come in and just enjoy the misery of a Bengals fan. I'm here for all audiences. That's fine too. But until next time, I'm going to leave you with a hooday and stay hungry for more Bengal Bites.